Heather grows increasingly frustrated at home. She has just caught another wasp in the kitchen, the third wasp this week. Simon, her husband, still has not called the pest control as he promised 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, both of them continue to look very attractive, the kind of couple that, at a glance, could make other people feel dirty and unkempt. Heather feels as if she is burning from the inside. A notification from the fertility app on her phone appears like a slap. Her fertile window is almost over. Simon, who has just put on his shoes to leave, tells her not to wait. He has to attend a club meeting that night, something Heather does not even know truly exists or not. Before leaving, he reminds Heather to pick up the wine order for tomorrow's important dinner. His tone is like a boss speaking to a housekeeper. Heather stares at the wasp still buzzing on the ceiling, then kills it with a quick movement. The small cracking sound triggers a childhood memory. She and Carla in elementary school found a pigeon with a broken wing in the school backyard. On the way home, Carla picked up a large rock and ended the pigeon's life, saying it was so it would not suffer. Heather does not know which disturbed her more, the sound of the bird's skull cracking or Carla's flat expression when she did it. The next morning, Heather accidentally overhears Simon talking on the phone. He is angry because someone woke him up until 2 a.m. His tone is not the voice of a tired husband, more like someone who feels disturbed while doing something that should be secret. Heather almost wants to call Carla, even though they have not spoken since graduating elementary school, but her finger stops above the screen. She cancels the intention and decides to cook dinner as well as possible. She begins to suspect that the wasps are entering through the smoke detector. That suspicion is proven when a wasp comes out from inside the device and flies low toward the other wasp's carcass near the window. During dinner, Heather hears a strange sound from above the table. Not Simon, not the plates, but a small buzzing that suddenly feels too close. She opens the cover of the smoke detector and is immediately stung by a wasp. In a mixture of anger and panic, Heather grabs a hammer and smashes the ceiling. From the hole she makes, a wasp nest falls and hundreds of wasps pour out like an army of darkness from a small hell. Right at that moment, Simon enters the kitchen. With extreme calm, too calm, he ushers Heather out and apologizes to his guests for the small incident. After the guests leave, Simon is angry. He says that Heather has ruined his important night, sabotaging a business opportunity he has prepared for months.
I'll call the exterminator in the morning.
Yes, greet yourself, Simon. Simon, your wife asked for the wasp exterminator to be called, and you never did. He promises to call the pest control the next morning, then simply leaves without saying where he is going. Heather watches him take his phone and send a text message while smiling slightly. That smile makes Heather want to destroy more than just the ceiling. Carla, meanwhile, is pregnant for the 5th time and works as a supermarket cashier. Her life is a combination of shifts that are too long, a salary that is too small, and exhaustion that is too familiar. After finishing work, she sits alone in the break room, opens her phone, and reads a message from Heather. The message asks to meet at a cafe the next day at noon. Carla knows that Heather is not the type of person who simply wants a reunion. There must be something. She often sends messages to a man named Logan who once promised to help pay the rent, but that man has not replied to messages since last week. At home with a man of unknown identity and her 4 children, Carla receives another message. This time from a regular customer named James, who asked her to meet at 10 p.m., a 2-hour meeting that makes Carla wonder silently, are those 4 children really all belonging to the man living with her? She meets with James as usual, and even though the money helps, it is still not enough. So she replies to Heather's message agreeing to the meeting. When they meet at the cafe, Heather looks like someone who wants to appear calm but is on the verge of collapse. They sit and talk casually. Heather opens the conversation about the pigeon incident, but then stops and decides to start from somewhere else. She explains that she and Simon have been trying to get pregnant for years without success, and it seems the problem is with her. Carla, without expression, asks whether Heather wants her baby. Heather shakes her head. She continues, saying that she suspects Simon once had an affair years ago. To test him, she created a fake profile and sent him a message. Simon replied. For Heather, that was already enough evidence, but she does not know that the woman who became Simon's mistress abroad was Heather herself.
But how do you know what he's been writing to her?
Because it's me.
Who's you?
The other woman. It's me.
For the past 2 years, Heather has sent various emails to Carla, even though she never got the reply she hoped for. And only about a week ago, she finally asked to meet in person. The meeting happened. However, instead of apologizing or rebuilding the relationship, Heather instead insulted Carla thoroughly. Since that incident, Carla decided to forget her and no longer wanted any dealings. But unexpectedly, Heather reveals a shocking intention.
I want you to kill Simon. He's lied. I've got £10,000 in this bag and there's another 40 once it's done.
She says that she wants Simon killed and she asks Carla to do it. To convince Carla, Heather even offers £10,000 up front, then promises an additional £40,000 later after the task is completed. Heather explains that the reason she wants Simon to truly disappear is because Simon has hurt her thoroughly. He has lied, cheated, even tortured her physically and emotionally. She says that Carla is the only person in this world she trusts enough to be capable of doing that. Carla, of course, immediately rejects the crazy request and firmly explains that the only creature she has ever killed was a pigeon, not a human. But instead of giving up, Heather raises the offer to £50,000. She even reveals that all this time she was the person behind the scam using Logan's identity. Heather knows very well that Carla is desperately needing money, and with a regretful face, she apologizes for once using her. However, she also reasons that she did all of that to ensure her plan this time would not be rejected by Carla. Carla, emotional, immediately stands up and leaves Heather, but not long after she comes back again.
£75,000.
And this time negotiates the payment to £75,000. Not long after that, Carla comes to Heather's house with the purpose of designing a perfect murder. She realizes that £75,000 is still not comparable to the risk if she has to go to prison. Carla wears gloves and a hoodie to disguise her identity, then secretly enters through the back door to avoid leaving traces or being seen by others. Inside the house, Carla begins sharing various information and theories she learned from crime shows on TV, especially series by Ryan Murphy. She suggests that the murder be carried out at night so the atmosphere is more supportive and reduces the chance of being caught. They design it so that the murder looks like the result of a failed robbery. Carla even suggests using a random object as a weapon so it cannot be traced. Carla also says she will take some valuable items from the house to make it more convincing and look like a real robbery. But Heather responds to that plan with a cynical attitude, as if Carla is only inventing a ridiculous scenario even though she has been paid a high amount. At that time, they are sitting while eating the food and drinks prepared by Heather, and Heather says that Carla's idea is too cliché. Heather then proposes a subtler plan according to her, namely drugging Simon during dinner. Then Carla comes afterward to finish him off. She even suggests that Simon's body be cut into pieces, frozen in plastic bags, then thawed little by little to finally be given to her dog. According to Heather, the reason for Simon's disappearance later will be covered up with the excuse of an affair, and she will gain sympathy as a wife who has been hurt and betrayed. Carla is momentarily stunned, but secretly admires Heather's extraordinary courage, especially since Simon himself is indeed not a good person. Carla then suggests that they combine both plans. Heather will drug or get Simon drunk during dinner. After Simon is unconscious, Carla will come and carry out the murder, then make it look as if it was only a failed robbery. To cover everything up, Heather will take sleeping pills that night and find Simon's body the next morning. They then begin practicing the scenario of how Heather will react when she pretends to find Simon's body in the morning, including how her tone of voice will be when calling the authorities to report the incident. However, Carla warns that Heather's acting must not look like bad acting in cheap films on Tubi. She also asks Heather to stop worrying too much about losing her belongings if she wants her plan to run perfectly. Heather says that she does want to get rid of Simon, but at the same time she wants all other aspects of her life to continue without being disturbed. Carla then reminds her that a plan this big will definitely bring major changes, and Heather must be prepared to face interrogation as well as arrange a reasonable alibi. Heather then opens up and begins talking about her dark past. She says that her teenage years were filled with pressure and suffering. She blames Carla for all of that. Even though Carla admits she does not remember at all what she did in the past, Carla apologizes for whatever she might have done, but that only makes Heather more emotional. Heather says that an apology is not enough, especially if it comes 30 years after all those wounds occurred. She reminds Carla about the incident when they were still in 7th grade, not long after the pigeon incident that Carla killed. At that time, Carla made up a story that Heather liked one of their classmates, Toby, and even said that Heather often touched herself while imagining Toby. Heather denied all of that, but the gossip still spread quickly and school friends began calling her with the mockery Dirty Heather. Carla finally threatens to leave and cancel everything if Heather keeps digging into that painful past. But when Heather tries to stop her, Carla finally reveals that she does have a desire to hurt Heather. She says that all this time she has felt jealous because Heather appears to have a perfect life and always judges her from a distance every day. Carla finally reveals that on the morning when she killed that pigeon, she had just witnessed her father physically abusing her mother. It was Carla who called the ambulance at that time, and not long after that incident, the father began abusing her as well. Heather admits she knew about Carla's father's violence because she once saw the bruises on Carla's body. Heather also says that she was never allowed to come to Carla's house, so she thought they could be friends and do fun things together so that Carla would feel better. However, when Carla reveals that they knew about the violence but did nothing, Heather answers that she was still too young to know whether her mother did something or not. One day, Carla's bullying of Heather grew worse. Carla took her to the school storage room and beat her, knowing that Heather would not report her because they were friends, and Carla realized she could be expelled if found out. However, Heather did not mention Carla's name as the perpetrator.
Well, that's school for you. Training ground for life.
We'd been friends, Carla. I didn't name you when they asked. I knew you could have been expelled.
When Carla sees a photo of Simon and Heather, she only then realizes that Simon is actually James, one of her clients. Perhaps in her mind at that moment is, "Oh my God, what a plot twist. Mama, this is my life. It turns out one of my regular clients all this time is none other than the husband of my friend from elementary school." Heather then reveals that she knows Carla and Simon have known each other for a long time and became very close around 7 months earlier. At that time, she tried to make Carla faint with tea that had been laced with drugs, but because it was not strong enough, she finally used chloroform. Heather is a small but calculating attacker. She once wrote a letter and slipped it into the mailbox of the neighbor next door, the Ledfords. After returning home, she woke Carla, who had been tied and gagged in a chair. She then reminded Carla of the incident at the 9th grade disco, when Carla sexually assaulted her in the women's restroom, then whispered the words "good girl" into her ear afterward. Heather adds that after that incident, Carla never hurt her again, as if she had already gotten what she wanted. When Heather leaves the room to call Simon and ask what time he will come home, she also asks him to send a message when he is already on the way home. Meanwhile, Carla tries to escape but fails. Heather returns, removes the gag from Carla's mouth, and gives her a chance to speak. Heather says that as a result of that past incident, she now has difficulty getting pregnant, and she does not know what Carla put inside her. But she feels there is something growing inside her body. Even though the scan results show nothing, Carla, in a state of panic and despair, says that she truly regrets what she has done and wishes she could take it back. She begs Heather not to kill her for the sake of her children, and even offers to give the baby she is carrying to Heather after it is born, because that baby is Simon's child. However, Heather instead takes a knife and says that she was actually only pretending to call Simon because she has already killed Simon in a fit of jealousy and hidden his body in the cupboard under the stairs. Heather adds that her plan is to use that knife to remove the baby from Carla's belly while she is still alive. That way, she can see the baby, take it, and hold it in her arms before Carla dies from blood loss. Carla screams for help, and her scream is heard by Ruby Ledford, the young daughter of the next-door neighbor who is curious enough to approach the fence to peek into Heather's house. Shortly after Heather silences Carla, a text message comes into her phone, a brief distraction that gives Carla a chance to escape. She frees herself, runs, and grabs the nearest stool, holding it up as a weapon to keep Heather away. Carla tries to find a way out of the tightly locked house. Meanwhile, Ruby watches the scene through the window and begins to feel anxious. Carla soon realizes that she is truly trapped. There is no safe way out. In that chaos, she asks Heather whether she really killed Simon and questions why she is doing all this violence, even though she always said she hated violence. She admits that she herself has committed violence, but only as a spontaneous reaction, an instinctive urge, not the result of a plan full of hatred like Heather's. She empathizes that Heather is no better than her, perhaps even worse. Carla herself is now just an ordinary cashier also living in misery. None of them is better. In a silence heavy with tension, Heather places the knife on the table right between them, then tells Carla to think about what her instinct says. Heather slowly steps toward Carla. Both of her hands are hidden in her pockets, as if giving her a choice between kindness and violence. Carla, overcome by fear and suspicion that Heather is hiding another knife in her pocket, finally grabs the knife from the table and stabs it into Heather's body. Only after that does she realize that what was in Heather's pocket was only a small stone, not a weapon.
You home?
Good girl. Not long after, Simon enters the house and sees Heather lying covered in blood on the floor, while Carla stands with the knife in her hand. He immediately runs to Heather, hugs her tightly as her last breath is exhaled.
Heather! Come back!
Simon then looks toward the window and finds Ruby and her mother watching everything from the house next door. He panics and chases them, trying to explain that it was Carla who killed Heather. However, Ruby's mother, who at that time is holding a letter from Heather, calmly tells him to stay away, stating that they know what he has done. In the chaos, Simon snatches the letter when it is dropped. Its contents are a message from Heather to the Ledford family asking for help because she feels her life is threatened and suspects that Simon and his mistress are planning something against her. Not long after that letter is found, the police arrive and seal the crime scene. Heather, with all her obsession for revenge, has indeed arranged everything carefully. However, if it is indeed true that Carla has ruined Heather's life so badly, then now with murder on her hands, Carla too finally cannot escape the trap of prison. Fate has chosen its path and everyone must pay with a fitting price.